A tooth infection killed more people last century than all wars combined. Not bullets, not bombs, a tooth. And right now, today, in 2026, if the supply chain that delivers this one item fails for 60 days, that statistic comes back. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that item is, where you can get it right now without a prescription for under $20, and why in every documented economic collapse of the last 100 years, it traded for more than gold. Stay with me, because the first 30 seconds of what I'm about to show you will change how you think about preparedness permanently. Caracas, Venezuela, 2017. A woman hasn't slept in 4 days. Her 9-year-old son has a fever that won't break. The left side of his jaw is swollen to the size of a fist. A dentist 3 weeks ago told her it was a tooth infection. Treatable. Simple. 10 days of amoxicillin and it's gone. She has been to 11 pharmacies. 11. The shelves are empty. Not low. Empty. She has a gold chain worth $400 around her neck. She has offered it at every counter. Nobody can help her. Not because they don't want the gold, because there is nothing to sell. Her neighbor 2 floors down has a bottle of amoxicillin she bought 6 months ago at a veterinary supply store before the shelves went bare. It cost her $3. She trades it for the gold chain without hesitating for a single second. $3 just bought $400 worth of gold. Not in a textbook. On a Tuesday afternoon in a country sitting on top of the largest oil reserves on the planet. That is what this video is about. In the last video, we covered the first asset that consistently outperformed gold in every major collapse of the last 100 years. If you haven't seen it, the link is above. Today we're going into the second one, and I want to be clear before we go further. This one is darker, more important, and more urgent than anything I covered last time. Because the first asset addresses want. This one addresses survival. There is a difference between those two things that becomes very clear very fast when the system stops working. Stay with me for the next few minutes. What I'm about to show you is documented, it is verifiable, and it will permanently change how you think about what preparedness actually means. Let's go back further than Venezuela. Let's go back to 1928. Alexander Fleming is a Scottish bacteriologist working in a laboratory in London. He comes back from vacation in September to find that one of his petri dishes has been contaminated by mold. A circle of dead bacteria surrounds the mold. Any other researcher in history might have thrown the dish away, noted the contamination, and moved on. Fleming stops. He looks at the dead bacteria. He understands what he is seeing. That mold, Penicillium notatum, is producing something that kills bacteria. He doesn't know it yet, but he is looking at the discovery that will save more human lives than any other in the history of medicine. Now here is the part that most people intellectually understand but have never actually felt. Before that moment, before 1928, bacterial infections were a leading cause of death everywhere on Earth. Not cancer, not heart disease, infections, routine, ordinary, everyday infections. A child who stepped on a nail in the backyard and didn't clean the wound properly might be dead within a week from sepsis. A tooth abscess that went untreated could spread to the jawbone, enter the bloodstream, reach the brain, and kill an otherwise healthy adult in 72 hours. Pneumonia, strep throat, infected cuts, urinary tract infections, ear infections, the entire category of ailments that today's Americans treat as minor inconveniences, things you deal with on a Thursday afternoon, pick up a prescription for at CVS, finish in 10 days and forget about, were, for the entire span of human civilization before 1928, potentially fatal events. Think about what that means. Every single person alive today exists inside a bubble of medical protection that is approximately 97 years old. We were born into it. We have never lived outside it. And because we have never lived outside it, we have completely lost the ability to viscerally understand what the world looks like when that bubble pops. Venezuela understood the hard way between 2016 and 2020, as the Maduro government's economic collapse compounded with international sanctions to fracture every supply chain in the country. The pharmaceutical network went first, not last, first. The Venezuelan Pharmaceutical Federation documented medicine shortages exceeding 85% for essential drugs. Stop and actually picture that number. Walk into your nearest CVS right now. Look at every shelf in that store. Now imagine that 85 out of every 100 items simply aren't there, not out of stock with a restock date. Gone from the supply chain entirely with no alternative and no timeline. That was Venezuelan pharmacies in 2017. That was the reality that woman with the gold chain was navigating when her son's jaw was the size of a fist and she had visited 11 empty pharmacies. Mothers drove 4 hours across city lines to find a single course of amoxicillin. People with bacterial pneumonia died. People with infected wounds that would have healed with a week of antibiotics died. People with strep throat that progressed untreated into rheumatic fever died. Not from exotic tropical diseases, not from some novel pandemic pathogen, from the exact same infections that killed people in 1850, because the $4 prescription that would have saved them did not exist within accessible distance. And here is where the barter economics becomes something that should genuinely disturb you. The people who had secured any supply of broad-spectrum antibiotics before the collapse found themselves holding the single most powerful barter asset in the entire country. Not the most valuable, the most powerful. There is a difference. Value is negotiable, power is not. When your child has a bacterial infection that is visibly progressing, jaw swelling, fever climbing, the timeline of sepsis running in the background like a countdown, and the only antibiotics within 50 miles are in someone else's possession, that is not a negotiation between equals. That is an asymmetric leverage situation in which the holder of the antibiotics can name any terms they want, and the other party has no choice but to accept. More valuable than food, because food can be grown, scavenged, found. More valuable than water, because water can be filtered and boiled. More valuable than gold, because gold cannot interrupt the biological process by which a bacterial infection progresses from localized to systemic to fatal. There is no substitution, no folk remedy, no home treatment. No wild plant that replicates the mechanism of a broad-spectrum antibiotic at the cellular level. You cannot boil bark into cephalexin. You cannot grow amoxicillin in your backyard. When the pharmaceutical supply is gone, what fills the vacuum is not an alternative. It is the same mortality curve that governed human existence for 10,000 years before Fleming looked at that petri dish. Now here is the part that feels like information you're not supposed to have. In the United States right now, today, without a prescription, without a doctor's visit, without any questions asked, you can purchase antibiotics that are molecularly identical to human-prescribed medications, manufactured in FDA-inspected facilities for between $8 and $20 per course. They are sold as aquarium treatments and livestock supplements. Fish Mox contains amoxicillin, the exact same compound prescribed for ear infections, tooth abscesses, respiratory infections. Fish Flex contains cephalexin, a first-generation cephalosporin used for skin infections, urinary tract infections, strep. The capsules in many cases are identical in appearance, dosage, color, and imprint markings to their human pharmacy counterparts. I want to be precise about what this is and what it is not. This is not medical advice. Taking any antibiotic without a proper diagnosis carries real risk. Antibiotic resistance is a documented and serious public health problem. Those facts are true and they matter. But the barter economics are also true and they also matter. A $20 supply of broad-spectrum antibiotics represents a more powerful crisis asset than a $500 gold coin in any scenario where the pharmaceutical supply chain has failed. Because the coin sits inert in your palm while your neighbor's child is running a fever that is climbing past the point where it stops being scary and starts being dangerous. The Journal of Political Economy research on barter economies under crisis conditions is unambiguous on this point. Medical supplies consistently commanded the highest exchange premiums in every studied collapse scenario, higher than ammunition, higher than fuel, higher than food, higher than precious metals. The reason is simple and brutal. Every other need has a workaround. Hunger has workarounds. Thirst has workarounds. Cold has workarounds. A bacterial infection in a world without antibiotics has exactly one outcome and no workarounds at all. Here is the number that puts everything in perspective. 1 ounce of gold right now costs approximately $1,900. A full supply kit of broad-spectrum antibiotics, amoxicillin, cephalexin, ciprofloxacin, covering the most common bacterial threats, costs under $100 total at any aquarium or livestock supply store. In a scenario where the pharmaceutical supply chain fails, that $100 kit occupies a position of leverage that the $1,900 coin cannot touch. Because leverage in a barter economy is not determined by what something costs. It is determined by what need it addresses and whether that need has any substitute. Gold has substitutes. Antibiotics treating sepsis in a child do not. That is the second asset. That is why it sits above alcohol in the crisis hierarchy. That is why in Venezuela, in Lebanon, in any country where the pharmaceutical supply has fractured, the people who understood this early did not trade their antibiotics for gold. They traded their antibiotics for gold and kept the antibiotics. Now, we have covered 2 assets. Both of them are spent when used. The alcohol is gone the moment it leaves your hand. The antibiotics are consumed the moment they work. They are powerful, they are essential, but they are finite. Every unit you trade or use brings you 1 unit closer to 0. The third asset is different in a way that breaks the logic of everything we have discussed so far, because it does not get consumed, it does not get spent, it does not decrease when you use it, it multiplies. In Argentina in 2002, there was one category of item trading at 15 to 20 times its pre-crisis retail price inside the barter networks. Not medicine, not alcohol, something that most people in this country have never once considered a financial asset. Something you can buy right now for under $2. Something that in the right hands, in the right crisis, does not just preserve wealth, it generates it. Season after season, year after year, from nothing but soil and sunlight. That is the next video, and if you think you know what it is, you do not yet understand why it matters. The detail that makes it dangerous is not what it is. It is one specific word that determines whether it works or whether it leaves you with nothing after the first harvest. That word, that detail. Next video. Subscribe, hit the bell, because that one is the asset nobody sees coming, and it might be the most important thing on this entire list.